Hi everybody, I'm Becca. I'm one of our tour guides here in Washington, D.C. Thank you for joining us for this live tour of the National Mall. So a couple of things I want to mention before we get started. If you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. This is one of many live and virtual tours that we have available right now. And we have a lot of great travel videos that have travel tips for cities all around the world. So you definitely want to subscribe so you don't miss anything. And of course, if you know somebody who's coming to Washington, D.C., or if you yourself watching live in the D.C. area, be sure to share this video, post this video, because everything that you're going to see on our live tour today, you can actually come and do in person. We are doing tours in person, either private tours or small group tours, keeping the safety of our guests and guides at the forefront of our mind. So if you're interested in learning more about what we're doing in person, you can visit our website. So be sure to leave your questions and comments in the comment box below. This is our kind of early attempt at live streaming on YouTube, so bear with us. But we're going to do our best to tackle your comments as quickly as we can. And if I don't get to it in the video, I promise I'll hop into the comments after and answer any question you have about Washington, D.C. and the National Mall. So I keep saying that word, the National Mall, and when people hear that, they think shopping, but that is not what the National Mall is. This is the National Mall, the green park space that we're standing on. The National Mall was actually part of the original plan for Washington, D.C. Washington, D.C. Is designated as the nation's capital in 1790. George Washington, our first president, was tasked with creating a new federal district to be the new capital of our new nation. He works with a Frenchman named Pierre Charles L'Enfant to create the first map of Washington, D.C. And L'Enfant envisioned a grand avenue that will extend from the Capitol building, lined with trees, and which in the future will have statues to great Americans, which is basically what we have today. The National Mall as we know it today comes from something called the McMillan Plan in 1902, which was basically a congressional plan to beautify the nation's capital and to revert a lot of the city back to L'Enfant's original vision. So National Mall is a word that was really common in the 18th and 19th century. It comes from British English, but today when we think of mall, we think of shopping, so I know that can be a little confusing. What this is it's basically America's backyard. This is open public park space that anybody can come and use and visit. You'll see often festivals, rallies, concerts, events taking place out here. And when we have a beautiful day like today, you'll see people jogging and biking, playing sports, and just enjoying our nation's capital. Now, the best part about being down on the National Mall is it's a great spot to take pictures. It's definitely a great spot to enjoy the beautiful fall weather and colors. You're seeing some of the highlights of the National Mall. That dome structure on the far left is the United States Capitol building. That has been home to Congress since 1800. We're seeing the top of the dome, which is actually made out of solid cast iron. It's about 9 million pounds of metal sitting on top of that building. And then over to the right, sort of that tall, skinny structure there, that's the Washington Monument. It's shaped like an obelisk from the ancient Egyptians. It was the first national monument to be authorized in the new nation's capital, but it wasn't completed until 1884. It is 555 feet tall, 5 1/8 inches. That's about 169 meters. When it was completed, it was the tallest building in the world. It's definitely not the tallest building in the world today. The Eiffel Tower came along pretty soon after and beat us in that regard, but it is the tallest building in Washington, D.C. And I'll give you a little tip for our virtual tour today. From almost everywhere we're going to be standing on the mall, you're going to be able to see the Washington Monument. Now we're going to head over this way. We're heading down to see some of our memorials up close. On the National Mall, we have 3 memorials that honor Americans at war. The National World War II Memorial, which we're not going to see in this virtual tour, the Vietnam Veterans Memorial, and the Korean War Memorial. We're starting with the Vietnam Veterans Memorial because this was actually the first war memorial to be dedicated on the National Mall. It was dedicated in 1982, and the concept for this memorial actually came from a Vietnam veteran, a young man named Jan Scruggs. Scruggs was really motivated to create a space in our nation's capital and a place of honor that could serve as a healing space for the men that served in this war and for the families who lost their loved ones. The memorial's design was actually done by a student named Maya Lin. She entered a design contest, and out of the 1,400 submissions, her design was chosen. Imagine being a college student and winning a national design contest. Her design is really simple, but it's incredibly emotionally powerful. What she's designed here is an almost 500-foot long granite wall. From this spot, you can almost sort of tell how it's curved out of the landscape here. So you can't just drive by this memorial. This isn't something you can just sort of skip by. The only way to really experience it is to walk through. You'll notice that the wall starts out rather small, but as you continue through, it gets larger until it reaches the center point where it stands almost 10 feet. And when we enter the wall in a moment, you're going to see that every inch of this wall is covered in names. The names of the over 58,000 men and 8 women who were killed in action or missing in action during the 16 years of American engagement in Vietnam. Now, these names are listed chronologically, and the names are listed in chronological order, beginning and ending in the center. So when we first walk in, we're actually entering in the middle of the list. So we'll be sure to point that out as we walk through the wall. You're going to notice as we walk through that all names are equal in the eyes of this wall. We don't list rank, we don't list how long they served, we don't list any medals of distinction that they are awarded. You're simply going to see the name of the service member with a symbol. I'll point out the 2 symbols to you while we're going through the wall. One symbol is a diamond. You're going to notice that most of these names have diamonds. Diamond represents killed in action. The other symbol is a cross. They're a little bit harder to find, but again, I'll point that out as we walk through. The cross represents missing in action. Now, if you are visiting the wall and hoping to find a name, there are databases and books to help you do so. We have a whole video that can help you find a name on the wall. Now, just as a word of warning for this virtual tour, when we're actually inside our war memorials, I'm going to be respectful of that space and not be speaking, but be sure to keep your eyes peeled to the camera, and I'll point out some things along the way. I mentioned before we went down into the wall, there is a way to find a name. Of course, with them listed chronologically, it could be a little hard just to walk through and try to find your loved one. So since the wall was dedicated in 1982, there have been books placed here. They're like a phone book. They list all the names alphabetically, and then they have the panel number and the line number so that you can find your loved one. And of course, because it's 2020, there's also an app to help you do so as well. But these are here 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. There have been 2 additions to this memorial since it's been dedicated, 2 statue sets that have been added. The first statue set you can see right up ahead. This is the 3 servicemen statue added in 1982. Added in 1984, 2 years after the wall was dedicated. This statue set was done by an artist named Frederick Hart, who had actually come in 2nd place in the original contest for the memorial's design. What we see here is a representation of the young men who fought on the ground. These guys are presented particularly not to represent any particular branch or rank, and they really give us an idea of the young men who went off to fight in Vietnam. Notice their gaze, all 3 men looking towards the wall. Frederick Hart said that he saw the wall as a sea of sadness, and these 3 young men standing on its shore, gazing into the abyss. The next addition was the Vietnam Women's Memorial, added in 1993. You can see it through the trees here. We'll be sure to share a photo of an up-close view of it in the comments. The sculptor, Glenna Goodacre, helped to represent the women who served in non-combat roles, specifically the 11,000 women on the ground in Vietnam serving as combat nurses. Now, as we leave the Vietnam Veterans Memorial, we're going to cross the National Mall. You're going to get a breathtaking postcard view, and we're making our way over to the Korean War Veterans Memorial, which was the next war memorial to come, dedicated in 1995. But along the way, you're going to start to see what makes the National Mall so beautiful, this open park space meant to be enjoyed, people out scootering and biking. This is a pretty quiet day, actually, on the National Mall. You can imagine during peak summertime in previous years, or peak fall, it could be pretty crowded out here. As we're making our way down this path, you might start to see a body of water. This is the reflecting pool. The reflecting pool was part of the McMillan plan to add water elements to the National Mall to beautify this area, make it more park-like, and then it was integrated into the design for the Lincoln Memorial, which was dedicated in 1922. The reflecting pool runs about 1/3 of a mile, and it is man-made. You probably recognize the reflecting pool from a movie, Forrest Gump. I'm sure some of you have seen it. There's sort of that iconic, it's a little buggy, there's that iconic scene down in Forrest Gump, Jenny and Forrest reunited. And of course you get that beautiful postcard view. You're getting a really nice view of the United States Capitol building and the Washington Monument. From here, it may be a little hard to tell on your video, but there's a change of color in the Washington Monument. If you start at the bottom and work your way up, you get about 1/3 of the way up, you might notice a change in the color of the stone. That is because they started construction on the Washington Monument, ran out of money, and they stopped construction for 23 years. So for 23 years, it was just a sump down here in the middle of what is the National Mall. So a little embarrassing. When they went to continue the construction after the Civil War, they went to a new quarry to get new marble, and thus a pretty distinct change in the color of the stone. Now, as you take a little glimpse at the reflecting pool, if you remember that scene in Forrest Gump, she's running through this big, blue, beautiful water. You can probably tell this is not the actual water. We would not recommend reenacting that scene during your visit. Now, from where we are on this far west side of the National Mall. It's about 2 miles from where we are at the Lincoln Memorial, all the way down to the United States Capitol building. So today, the National Mall is about 2 miles long and a half-mile wide. So we are continuing across the National Mall over to the Korean War Veterans Memorial. As I mentioned earlier, it was dedicated in 1995. This is a war that we often think of as a forgotten war. The war itself runs from 1950 to 1953, and it's sort of wedged between World War II and Vietnam. So for the United States, and particularly kind of in our study and pop culture of American history, this war really gets overshadowed. This memorial was dedicated really with the idea of reminding visitors why this war is so significant. There's some really interesting elements to this memorial that you're going to start to notice as we're approaching. I think what really jumps out at everybody are the 19 steel statues. You can start to see them through the trees here. These 19 steel statues were sculpted by a veteran, a man named Frank Gaylord. They represent a typical combat patrol. You'll notice they're definitely dressed for the weather. They have their ponchos on, but they do represent the 4 different branches that fought in the Korean War. So you'll see a little variation in their uniform and their gear. These guys had to be prepared to be ambushed anytime, anywhere. So these 19 statues are arranged in such a way that no matter where you're standing in the memorial, one of them will always be looking towards you. So as we sort of walk through, keep an eye on the camera. It's going to pretty much look that no matter where we're standing, one of these guys is looking towards us. A few other things to take a look for as we're walking through. You're going to see the names of other countries. This is really significant. It's the only war memorial where we honor our international allies. This was the first time that we served as part of the United Nations fighting force, and so we honor our United Nation allies. So you'll see the names of other countries. You'll also notice that this has a black granite wall similar to Vietnam, but there aren't names listed here, there are faces. These are the faces of over 2,000 real Americans who served in this war. These are taken from photographs, so these are the real people on the ground. It represents all sorts of branches, all sorts of roles, even support staff, and we'll point out a pretty interesting addition to the wall. So we're going to walk through. Again, I'm not going to talk too much while we're inside the memorial to be respectful of the space, but I'll be sure to point out a few things along the way. So as you're coming down to the end of this wall, again, all these images you're seeing are come from real photographs, real documentary images, and you may notice up on the wall up here the image of a dog, a German Shepherd. Might seem a little unusual perhaps, but this is one of many canines that served in the Korean War. The canine units were used to find explosive and mines, and they were highly effective. In fact, if you talk to veterans of the Korean War, they often talk about the incredible work these canine units did. So this is very unusual. This is the only war animal that's honored in a memorial on the National Mall. It's not the only dog that you will find in a memorial on the National Mall though, and to find out more, you have to watch our other YouTube channels, our other YouTube videos. Now, as we're coming around, there's one aspect of this memorial I want to mention, and we're seeing it really lovely right now because the sun is starting to set. But as we come behind the memorial, you can see, of course, these beautiful seal statues. But if you look back towards the wall, you'll notice that these 19 statues actually make 19 reflections. So you've got the 19 statues in person, and then there are 19 reflections in the wall. 19 plus 19 is 38. This number is significant. It's a reference to the 38th parallel, that dividing geographic point between North and South Korea. So it's a really subtle way to have a reference to that very important physical space. It also gives it a bit of a ghostly feeling, like the idea that there's just rows and rows of these men marching through. Now for this virtual tour, we're really just seeing a handful of the memorials. There are even more memorials around the tidal basin. There's museums and other sites all through Washington, D.C. So if you want to know more, be sure to check our website. You can find out about the tours that we offer, check out our other Washington, D.C. videos, and get the inside scoop. If you follow us on Instagram, you'll see images from D.C. and our other cities as well, showing you all of our favorite sites. Speaking of favorite sites, we are coming up to my favorite place in all of Washington, D.C., the Lincoln Memorial. Abraham Lincoln, if you've ever seen me do anything for free tours by foot, Abraham Lincoln is my favorite president. So the memorial to President Abraham Lincoln was dedicated in 1922, almost 60 years after Lincoln's assassination here in Washington, D.C. at Ford's Theater. As we approach, you can really see the size and scale of this memorial. The size and scale really indicates the place that President Abraham Lincoln holds in the hearts and minds of the American people. This is a man who led us through the Civil War, led us through the bloodiest war in American history, led us through a time when the nation was splitting apart. He helped to end slavery in this country, and then he'll tragically become the first American president to be killed by an assassin. This memorial really speaks to all that and more. It's designed to look like a Greek-style temple. The marble comes from Marble, Colorado, and it's just so gorgeous. And certainly we're visiting right now during the day, but I would recommend that everybody should come and see it at night, at least once. From the outside, there are 36 columns going around the memorial, representing the 36 states in the Union at the time of Lincoln's death. And on the top of the memorial, the 48 states in the country when the memorial was dedicated. Sorry, that leaves out Alaska and Hawaii. No disrespect, but they were not states yet. In 1922, there's actually a small plaque on the lower part of the stairs here that includes Alaska and Hawaii today. Now, of course, one of the reasons to visit the Lincoln Memorial is, again, you're going to get that great view all the way down the National Mall. I'm going to be a real tour guide in that people always ask me where the restrooms are because they're sort of hidden here. The restrooms are actually underneath the memorial to the left of the stairs. There's this little door, and that's where you'll find restrooms. There's actually a huge underground portion to this memorial, but most of it is closed off to the general public. You ready to climb some steps? Let's go. Now, the Lincoln Memorial has been the site of many Civil War protests, rallies, and demonstrations, but I think none more famous than the event on August 28th, 1963. The March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom. This is where Martin Luther King Jr. stood when he gave his now famous I Have a Dream speech. So there's an engraving here to mark that spot, and you can stand in the same spot where Dr. King stood. He was one of 10 speakers that day. We just lost the last speaker from that event, Congressman John Lewis. So this is President Abraham Lincoln. Lincoln's statue is 19 feet tall seated. If he were standing up, he'd be 28 feet tall, and you wouldn't really be able to see his face. He's seated so that when you walk in, you can really make eye contact with our 16th president. His son, Robert Todd Lincoln, who was his only son to live past the age of 18, and who we talk about extensively on our tours and on our Tour Guide Tell All podcast, Robert Todd Lincoln was here when this memorial was dedicated in 1922. He was in his 80s, so this was his last public event, but he attended. He said the memorial was really beautiful and moving, but in particular, Robert Todd Lincoln said that he felt the representation of his father's face was one of the best likenesses that he had ever seen. So I like to believe that we're really looking at the face of President Abraham Lincoln. You might notice too, underneath his hands on either side, there's sort of this unusual shaping. This is called a fasces. You're gonna see this symbolism all throughout Washington, D.C. You see it on the outside of this memorial at the Capitol, Supreme Court, lots of others. A single stick in your hand would break very easily, but you bundle them together and they're unbreakable. It's a reference, of course, to the strength of the Union, our United States, and what Lincoln was fighting for during the Civil War. Now, when you're inside this beautiful memorial, you'll see, of course, the statue of Lincoln, but you want to be sure to step all the way in to both sides of the memorial, because inscribed on the walls are two of Lincoln's most famous speeches. In this room, we're seeing the Gettysburg Address, probably Lincoln's most famous speech. Lincoln delivers this speech during the Civil War. He's really talking about what we're fighting for. He says, "So this government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth." Of course, it's the opening line of the Gettysburg Address that's probably most famous, 407 years ago. If we were to go back outside and walk down every single step between this memorial, the statue, and the reflecting pool, there are 407 steps outside. So that's 87 steps. We're not gonna walk that today. I've already done my cardio, so I'm good. You might notice too, above the speeches themselves, there's actually murals. These murals have allegorical paintings that represent the themes of these speeches. So this memorial is coming up to its centennial celebration in 2022, so we're just 2 years away, and they aren't doing restoration work. They did work on the exterior, and soon they're gonna start working on the interior, and a big part of that will be bringing these murals back to their full glory. So hopefully if you come visit us in a year or two, it's gonna look like brand new. We're gonna go over to the other side. I'll show you the other speech. So on the opposite wall, another speech of Abraham Lincoln's. This is his second inaugural address. This is personally my favorite speech that Lincoln delivers in his lifetime. This is a speech he delivers at his second inauguration, just 5 weeks before his assassination. This is Lincoln entering a second term. He's winning the Civil War, and yet he gives a speech that really talks about the pain of the war, that talks about what the nation has gone through, the trials and tribulations. He talks about binding up the nation's wounds. Lincoln says, with malice towards none, with charity for all, with firmness in the right as God gives us to see the right. It's a really powerful speech, really beautiful. As you can see, it's also kind of long, so maybe you don't want to read the whole thing. I get that, but when you come here in person, you definitely want to look for one word because there is a mistake. Now, if you take a look here at the very first panel and you go down to that second paragraph, if you go up 2 lines from the start of the second paragraph, it says all, with high hope for the future. Now, if you were just to glance, you might not notice, but that future actually was originally carved with an E. The man doing the inscription that day put an E instead of an F. And you know the old saying, you know, set in stone, carved in stone, there's no backspace on a chisel, so that E is still there. They tried to fill it in, but it's just a little reminder that everybody makes mistakes now and then. Now, this is the last stop on our tour, but you guys, we have a few more minutes, so we're gonna let you in on a little tour guide secret. Now, there's definitely more to see inside the Lincoln Memorial, but I don't wanna tell you everything inside because I want you to come visit, take the tour with me in person, but I am gonna take you outside and show you my favorite view. First of all, a lot of people stop right in the center of the stairs, take their pictures, and stop there. But we always encourage our guests on our tours to come over to the side because you're really getting that beautiful view down the National Mall. You can see the Capitol building offset, the Washington Monument. You might notice a little green roofed building to the right. That's the Jefferson building of the Library of Congress. And that beautiful red brick building is the Smithsonian Institute Castle. So it's a really just iconic view. But even better, as you follow this little porch around, you can actually go all the way around the back of the Lincoln Memorial. And you might be wondering, like, why would I want to go around to the back? But you're going to get a really great view. The Lincoln Memorial is at the end of the mall, and it's right up against the Potomac River. The Potomac River is the dividing line between Washington, D.C. and the Commonwealth of Virginia. So when you come around to the back, you're getting a view of the Virginia shore, which of course is really lovely this time of year with the fall colors. But more importantly, you'll see a bridge, and I know this bridge is under construction, so it's not super picturesque at the moment, but this is our memorial bridge that leads right into Arlington National Cemetery. If you were just to walk straight across that bridge, drive the bridge and up, you might notice a small house. That house was once the home of Robert E. Lee. It was actually built by George Washington Custis Lee, who was Martha Washington's grandson. He left it to his daughter, Mary Anna, and she married her childhood sweetheart, Robert E. Lee. And once they got married, it became his property. So this was the Custis Lee home for many, many years. And when the Civil War breaks out, the Custis Lee family will leave this property. It'll be seized by the Union Army. And in 1864, the first soldier will be buried there. Of course, by the end of the Civil War, there will be thousands of soldiers buried on this property, and it is still a military cemetery today. So you get this really beautiful view of Arlington from the back of the Lincoln Memorial, and it's such a poignant connection. Lincoln leading the country during this terrible war, and Arlington beginning its journey as a place to honor our fallen heroes by starting as a Civil War cemetery. Now, this is going to be the end of our live tour of the National Mall. I want to thank you first and foremost for joining us. If you liked this video, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss any of our other great virtual tours, travel videos, or any other great travel content. Please share this video with anyone you know who's coming to visit DC, and you can always visit our website and book a tour with us in person. Of course, if you can't travel in person or you're not ready to travel in person, that's okay. We're here for you virtually and online. Finally, if you enjoyed the tour, I'm at Becca Grawl on Venmo. I would love to hear from you. Be sure to drop your questions in the comments and we'll be sure to answer them. Thank you so much for tuning in and have a great afternoon.